Welcome to the third Ceremonial News podcast, and this month we are overjoyed to welcome our next victim, our next interviewee, Jamie Lowther-Pinkerton, LVO MBE DL. Just by way of a brief introduction, if an introduction was needed, he was educated at Eton following training at Sandhurst, joined the Irish Guards, and throughout an amazing 20-year career with the British Army, served in the First Gulf War, after which he was promoted to the rank of Major and had an illustrious and fascinating military career, which deserves an interview of its own, really. Was appointed equerry to Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mother, in the mid-1980s, and in 2005 was appointed private secretary to Prince William and Prince Harry, and latterly the private secretary to the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. And now he's all ours, here with us this afternoon to answer our questions. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
It's very kind of you to have me, and I don't recognise myself from that glowing intro. Thank you.
I suppose the best place to start, really, if we may, is right back at the beginning. As a young boy, were you introduced to ceremonial events? Did you have a military upbringing?
Yeah, I did. I came from a military family, although my father had left the military by the time I was born, actually. But both sides of my family, my grandfather, my mother's father, was a general in the Indian Army, the old Indian Army, and my family have been sort of sailors and soldiers all the way through, really. And I suppose the first ceremonial event I went to was I remember my father taking me to the Edinburgh Tattoo, which was a fantastic experience. I still remember it. I was about sort of 6 or 7 at the time. And I think I went to the Queen's birthday parade, better known as Trooping the Colour, when I was a boy as well. That blends with later events. I can't quite remember.
And did you ever think back then that you would be taking part in these events later on in life?
Well, I hoped so, and I always wanted to be a soldier, which wasn't a great boost for my education, actually, because whilst everybody else was striving to get to university and places, in those days, you didn't need huge academic qualifications to join the army. So I slightly took it easy, knowing where I was going. But I'd always wanted to go there. Yeah, that was my direction.
And your time being educated at Eton, I was reading recently online somewhere that they have their own military tattoo. Is this a new thing, or is this something that was happening when you were there?
No, it's been going for years and years and years. I mean, the Eton, the equivalent of the sort of Combined Cadet Force, or ACF at Eton, is a thing. It's called the Eton Rifles, hence the sort of the song and this sort of thing. And so it's a formed up battalion with its own colours and that sort of thing. That masks the fact that in fact it's a whole bunch of teenagers having a good time, same as the ACF and the CCF. And I was in the Corps, as it's called, for a couple of years, including a fireman's strike where, bizarrely, we found a very aged Dennis fire engine, which had been locked away and was covered in dust sheets and things in some garage at the back of Eton. And that was resurrected and done up and given to the Corps. And we used to roar around the streets of Eton with this thing, ringing the bell. Thank God there was never a fire. We wouldn't have been any good at that. But it was all good fun. So it was the same as the ACF or the CCF, really, with a few sort of bells and whistles. And the tattoo itself happens every year. It has done for hundreds of years, I think.
Right. I could be very cruel at this stage, of course, and ask you to sing the Eton Rifles song, but I think maybe we'll leave that for next time.
Yeah, if you would. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
So did you take part in the tattoo when you were there?
Yeah, no, I was part of that fire crew, actually.
Right, okay.
And what it is, it's a sort of ceremonial event. So it's got the normal march pasts and that sort of thing, but it also has a sort of cameo number. And when they had the 200th anniversary of Waterloo, everybody dressed up in the right kit, and there was a sort of a replay a corner of Waterloo went on one of the playing fields where they have this thing. But it's a thriving organisation, the CCF at Eton, as it is in other schools.
Is this something that the public can see, or is this something that goes on sort of behind closed doors? Is it?
It's not. No, yeah, it's not behind closed doors. It's basically done for the boys and the masters and parents if they want to go. But it actually runs alongside a main road, and you can lean over the wall and look down on the field where it happens. So it does attract a good crowd along the roadside.
I'll look out for that one next year. So from Eton, obviously that will have given you a great grounding for your training at Sandhurst, which of course is where your military career started and where you will have concentrated on your officer training. But I just wondered how much emphasis whilst at Sandhurst is given to the ceremonial side of things as well. Is it all about being a soldier and putting on the tin hat, or is there a good mixture of the ceremonial as well?
I mean, it's a mixture, and actually, I did. I joined the Brigade of Guards, so in those days you had to do a pre-course. All the officers who wanted to go into a Guards regiment used to have to go to the old Guards depot, which no longer exists, and you did a 3 or 4 month potted recruit training in a squad alongside the other squads, and that really, to be honest, took the sting out of Sandhurst in that they taught you. To be frank, it was a far harsher environment than Sandhurst itself. And a great emphasis being at the Guards depot was on breaking the man down and building him up with drill and ceremonial, apart from anything else, because they had to prepare people for going into the Guards regiments, which were on ceremonial duties in London. So when I got to Sandhurst itself, the same thing happened, and the colour sergeants who took the officer cadets at Sandhurst were predominantly, not exclusively, but Brigade of Guards, warrant officers and colour sergeants. So the whole drill, bulling the boots, making sure that you were immaculate turned out, and towards the latter end, obviously, of the Sandhurst course, a lot of emphasis was put on the Sovereign's Parade, which is the big parade at Sandhurst where you pass out and the adjutant rides up the steps on his horse and that sort of thing. And that actually is pretty much a mirror of the core of Trooping the Colour. So it's the same sort of parade. It's a march past in slow and quick time and an inspection. But it's a big part of the training for all arms of the British Army. Obviously, send for their officers go there initially, and then they go off to do their special to arm training. But because of that, it's the British Army basic training is not centered around, but a big part of it is drill and ceremonial, because it's deemed to be a useful way of training the individual and the team.
Mm. So fond memories of Sandhurst?
Yeah, very fond memories. But I was in a weird moment when the Sandhurst course shrunk to 6 months only. So, which is quite a rush period. You know, if you're thinking of training somebody to be an officer, and actually the weight of the training really devolved on I went into the infantry, so onto the sort of infantry battle courses at Warminster and places like that. So it was a pretty quick in and out. Nowadays it's a year, and before I went there it was a year. So I was, in a way, I suppose I was lucky. It was just 6 months at the time.
I had the pleasure of attending Michael Parker's Music on Fire at Sandhurst event that he did a few years ago for the ABF, and I think there were quite a few people there that were horrified that he was setting fire to their lawn and generally making a mess of the place, as he generally tends to do very well. Yeah,
he's an amazing stager of events, isn't
he? He's very kindly agreed to become our patron for ceremonial news, and also for our little tattoo that we're doing next year, the British International Tattoo. So he's given us plenty of ideas at the moment. Unfortunately, we've not got the budget that he used to have, But yeah, he's given us plenty of hope and ideas. So, from a civilian's point of view, the ceremonies, Trooping the Colour, for example, are obviously extremely enjoyable events for us to watch. And one kind of expects the participants to enjoy them as much as we do. Is that true, or obviously they're very hard work and there's lots of time and effort that goes into them, and I certainly wouldn't expect anybody to say that they don't enjoy doing them, but are they? Is the involvement within them something that sort of takes the enjoyment out of them, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, I do see what you mean. I mean, my first 2 years when I left Sandhurst and went to the Irish Guards, which was my regiment, were spent on ceremonial duties. So I joined my battalion actually at Windsor, and we moved very quickly to Chelsea Barracks. And both of those two, which are still Guards Barracks, as you know, Chelsea isn't. I'm afraid Chelsea's been sold, but the both of those barracks were effectively focused on ceremonial soldiery. So I was on the Queen's birthday parade, the Trooping the Colour, as it's known, for both of those summers. And on the first summer, I carried the colour for my battalion. So the colour which was trooped was the Irish Guards colour, and I had the honour of carrying it. But the going back to your question, there's a huge amount of pride. It's a real team effort, and you start. I mean, particularly if you're the regiment that's trooping, you start preparing for it very early on, and the selections are made for the escort to the colour, which is the company which escorts the colour for obviously, and the number 2 guard, which will be also of the same regiment as the one trooping the colour, and the selection for that. So I think it's a 70-man group each. So it's quite it's 140 bodies out of a battalion of 650 as it was in those days. And they, in effect, get struck off for about 3 or 4 months before. And the way that the drill sergeants used to run it was that they used to sort of build you up. So you would get the basics right. You'd get your arms drill going first. In my case, colour drill going first. And then they would start putting you together in the sort of formations and getting the individual guards to operate properly as a team. And then they would start rehearsing the parade, or the format of the parade itself, and obviously coming together for the first and second rehearsals of the Trooping the Colour, which is essentially the same as the day itself, except you wear non-royal attendance kit, so your sash is changed from the gold kit you wear when the Queen is in attendance to a sort of crimson number. So it's very progressive, and I started off by doing weight training because I was a little sort of skinny thing that came out of Sandhurst, and you need to put on quite a lot of bulk, as all the Royal British Legion standard bearers will tell you, to actually get the and particularly with a regimental colour or a Queen's colour, obviously, which you carry on the day itself. They're quite heavy, and they're quite top heavy because they've got a big crown on the top of them, which is quite awkward to sort of manoeuvre around. So you needed to do a bit of weight training. I mean, it wasn't excessive, and actually the practice on the parade square was as much as effective really as pumping iron. But it was quite a sort of build up to it, and I remember on the day itself it was so second nature that you knew the guy who was in the first rank behind me, in my case, who would keep me centre, who would shout at me and scream at me and tell me, a guardsman rather than an NCO would be telling me how to line up, because I couldn't see because I had a bear skin on, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was fun, but it was a sort of fun in a professional sense rather than necessarily being a good day out. I mean, you were pretty relieved when it was all over, to be honest.
Straight to the bar afterwards.
Yeah, well, we had to actually. You have to go on straight onto Queen's Guard after the escort to the colour, and its 3 officers go immediately take over the Queen's Guard. So you don't get off for another 24 hours.
So very much straight to the bar after that then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thirsty work. I suppose you've sort of answered the next question, really, in that you said that it is that meticulously rehearsed and it becomes second nature, that it just sort of happens on the day. But do you get nervous? Did you for your first one? Did you always get nervous, or do you kind of just do it, the adrenaline kicks in, and then afterwards you look back and think, wow, we did it?
I mean, yeah, the adrenaline definitely kicks in. The first year I did it, when I carried the colour, it was very nerve-wracking, because you are out on your own, and when you take the colour from the regimental sergeant major out in the middle there, and you do the march pass, and you have to dip the colour to the Queen on the slow march and that sort of thing. There is nobody around you, and frankly, if you make a mess of it, then there was always this cry that the drill sergeant used to say, "Don't worry, sir. If you mess up, we'll burn you with the colours." Because we have to burn the colours if they touch the ground at the wrong moment. So it was. And the night before, it was. I don't think I got a lot of sleep actually. I was 19 years old, so it was quite a moment for me, really.
Did you watch that first one back?
Yeah, I did. Funny enough, I have actually got a copy of it. Somebody sent me a copy of it the other day on DVD. I hadn't seen it for years, and it was fun to look at. Yeah, we watched it in the evening on guard, because it was replayed by the BBC in the evening of the day it happened. So, and that was fun,
And so was that birthday parade your first big, apart from the fire engine at Eton? Was that your first big ceremonial parade?
I suppose so. But obviously the Sovereign's Parade at Sandhurst had come before that, but that was the first big one. And then I had, I suppose the other big event in those 2 years was I was part of the colour party. There were two colours on parade. For the marriage of the Prince of Wales and Lady Diana Spencer. So that was the following year, I think. Yes, in 1981, I think. And that was amazing. I mean, just shows the size of ceremonial in those days was something else quite different, really, to nowadays, where on Chelsea Barracks Square we had. For street lining, all the way to St Paul's from Buckingham Palace, we had formed up, and we had to step off very, very early to get there. I think I'm right in saying we had 5 Guards battalions and 2 Royal Marine Commandos and a couple of ships' companies worth of, street liners, and each one moving off, separately and marching in column through these enormous crowds. I mean, must have been an extraordinary sight seeing, and then you take up your position. My position was actually on the Mall, just up from the what we used to call the birthday cake. The big statue.
Sorry, yeah.
Palace, yeah. Between there and St James's Palace, the Irish Guards had that bit.
So you've mentioned the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana. Obviously, over the past few years, we've had some pretty high-profile royal weddings as well. Without giving away too many personal details from behind the scenes, what is the atmosphere like in the royal household during the run-up to any of the large events, but in particular to a royal wedding? Is it just the same as any other household during the run-up to a wedding on a grander scale, or?
Yeah, I think there's a few sort of dynamics running there. I mean, there is the sort of the feeling that anybody would have before a wedding, and it's fun to be involved in it, which is that it's a very happy occasion, etc. So you're on a sort of fun thing to do, if I can put it like that, a happy thing to do, and but it is. It's a major operation with so many working parts or moving parts that it's difficult to get them all on one page, really. And I had the privilege of being ultimately responsible for the wedding of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge in 2011, and that was quite something, because you started planning not necessarily on the back of a fag packet, but it was that initial thoughts, and then it grew into something. I mean, there were wonderful people who were involved, the Lord Chamberlain's office, people who are sort of, second nature to movements and logistics and this sort of thing. And the press side of it was enormous, with a press village built in Green Park, and then the military side of it, and the church side of it, and goodness knows what else. So it was one of those occasions. I left the army as a major, but if I ever wanted to know what it felt like to command a division or an army corps, then I think that was probably the closest I was ever going to get. Which the interesting lesson was, you just had to let everything go. I mean, there were such good people doing it that you just liaise with the police, and you liaise with and you had a very, very light rein, just coordinating things, which other people were doing, frankly, and doing it brilliantly. And so it was me really coordinating things and acting as a conduit with the couple, making sure that their wishes for that day were met. And actually, it was a lovely thing to be part of. Very lucky.
Did you go to them with any ideas, or did they come to you and say, this is what we would like, make it happen, or was it a two-way thing?
Well, I better not go too much into that, actually, but it was the same as any wedding. It was their day, and they had some brilliant ideas which all came to fruition, really, with the lovely church, amazing church service, and the rest of it. So yeah, no, definitely that day.
And we know Her Majesty the Queen has a great eye for detail for all things ceremonial. With regard to the weddings, is she quite hands-on, or is she quite happy to let the couple do what they want to do and just oversee it from afar?
Well, again, I must be circumspect of what I say, but I mean, effectively, everybody involved was very keen that this was their day, and they were the ones. I mean, you're right about the Queen and her eye for detail. My goodness, I mean, she's brilliant on the, you don't want to be wearing the wrong order of dress on the forecourt of Buckingham Palace, because I think she would spot it quicker than anybody else, frankly. Let's go anyway.
Well, thank you for answering those questions. I think one of the most iconic images that most of us have of the large royal events are the balcony appearances. What's it like behind the curtain there? Is it sort of very calm and serene on the balcony and people running around backstage, or does the excitement from the balcony sort of flow behind the curtain?
I mean, I think it's. I mean, I think the thing about. I mean, again, I can't be too specific, but I think the thing to remember is that normally the balcony moment is at the end of it all. So certainly for the people who have been organising it, it's a sort of moment of blessed release. So the fact is that if everything has gone more or less to plan, then it's a sort of wipe the sweat off the brow moment, and shortly you're going to go and have a nice drink. And that's got to be the way to look at it. So I think so, and hopefully for the royal family it's the same. But I wouldn't presume to guess on that one.
Of course. So obviously the royal weddings are a sort of very unique event. Do you have, those aside, do you have any events that you would say have stood out as being particularly special? Any favourites? And likewise, have there been any that you look back on in your career and think, I'm glad that's over and I don't want to do that again?
Yeah. I mean, on the ceremonial side, not really. I mean, no, I think those the ones I've described, the sort of in a ceremonial sense, which is really what you're interested in, were the sort of high points for me. I mean, low points. I think the sort of low point is a more general point, which is, of course, if you're in a Guards battalion which has got a 2-year posting to London, it is great fun doing these things, but and particularly for the soldiers, not the officers, it's pretty taxing, because they'll find themselves doing, not every day on guard, but they'll be doing sort of 2 or 3 days, possibly a month, a week, and each of those down days is getting kit together, and then they've got to fit their military training in between. And I think it's something which takes a lot of discipline and leadership at every level, and dedication by the soldiers to get through it, with a sort of spring in their step. And I think sometimes the length that one can be committed to public duties is a challenge. And I would say that that's probably the answer to your point about, and I'm glad that's over and done with, when you suddenly get yourself a nice posting and you go off to do a bit of proper soldiering. I mean, green soldiering, if you like. And that's great. It's a moment of release. It's fun doing it, but you can, like all good things, too much of a good thing,
So you said earlier on that you thought that the training that you get from a ceremonial point of view serves you very well as a soldier, as you say, when you're doing the serious soldiering elsewhere. How is that? How could you explain that to a civilian? How does it equate?
It's a difficult one to put across because, on the face of it, I mean, marching around and round Horse Guards Parade would seem as far as you can possibly get from going on operations somewhere around the world. And it's a difficult one to explain. I think it's about teamwork. It's about standards, and I'm sounding like Colonel Blimp here, and it's about getting to know the people who you're doing these things with the whole time, and understanding that you are, a part of a cog in a larger machine, and therefore if you don't do your bit, the whole thing's going to fall down. And all of those are very good skills to have, frankly, if you're going to go on operations in the army in a more general sense. So I think it is, and of course, the interesting thing is that the things like the Trooping the Colour and the Queen's Birthday Parade, the formations that the Guardsmen move into and out of are straight from the battlefield, not the modern battlefield, but the battlefield of 200 years ago. And the same principles of preparation and rehearsal and actually then implementation still apply, and they're rammed home to you on the drill square. So an instant reaction to orders, that sort of thing. So there are definitely transferable elements to it, and it is interesting. You look at quite rightly some of the other battalions in the army. You would say, come on, the old guards are getting picked for the Falklands again, etc., etc. What's that all about? We've been training for three, and they've got a point, and we can't sort of duck that one. And that our military skills, coming off 2 years of ceremonial duties, are just not going to be the same. But there is that element which is there and remains there, which is this cohesiveness, this discipline, self-discipline, and discipline imposed within Guards regiments. That is a benefit and a contributor, and actually it also gives you the framework to up those military skills very, very quickly, because it's just imparted. And you look at the examples of the Scots Guards, that 2nd Battalion Scots Guards, which I was in Chelsea Barracks with during those times I've been talking about. They were taken off ceremonial duties, put on transport, and then they fought their way up Mount Tumbledown, which is one of the toughest battles in the Falklands. And it was the Brigade of Guards straight off ceremonial duties that held the Ring of Dunkirk, not reflected in the film Dunkirk, which they seemed to be all Frenchmen, and the Guards were slightly maligned by being the pushers and shovers in on the beaches. Not that people were pushing and shoving, but they weren't actually there. They were on the Ring of Dunkirk. And there's a very interesting story that when I think the Coldstream Guards came back as they collapsed the rear guard and got on their ships and were brought back, the company sergeant majors got a grip of them on the way back across the channel and made them polish their kit, clean their rifles, clean their boots. And when they got off the transport, I think it was at Pevensey, the crowds there who had been dealing with wonderful people who had been dealing with the rest of the British Expeditionary Force coming off the ships in advance of them, started muttering, and there was the odd boo and this sort of thing, that they hadn't been involved. And then, of course, the word got round that these were the guys who had held the ring at Dunkirk, and they were marching off the ships with their kit properly sorted out on the crossing. Things were very quiet very quickly. So it's that sort of thing, you know. And I'm a guardsman talking, and all my friends who aren't guardsmen would be smiling at me saying this sort of thing. But that's what it's about, you know. That's the transfers.
And surely those transferable skills, now you've left the army, are still holding you in very good stead in your personal life and your business life.
Gosh, I don't know whether my wife would agree with that, but I mean, once you're a soldier, it doesn't matter what cap badge, you know, or Navy or Air Force or Royal Marines or whatever. You know, it's all Dr. Johnson was right. You know that it sticks with you if you've been a soldier, and you don't cast off a lot of you carry a lot of baggage around with you, and some of it good, some of it bad, you know, but you can't get rid of it. That's what I'm sure.
Now, again, I could be very, very cruel because we're recording this on Zoom, and a lot of us are used to getting dressed from the waist up at the moment, but I could ask you to show us your shoes and see how clean they are at the moment, but I will refrain from doing that just in case.
I had a period in my army career where I wasn't in the guards, and actually that killed me of shining my boots too much.
So now it's all over. Your career isn't over, your military career is over. Is it something that you miss when you watch these events on the television, when you watch the tattoo and when you watch the parades? Do you miss it, or do you think, yeah, I enjoyed it, but I'm glad to be a spectator now?
Yeah, it's a very good question, that actually, and I guess it applies not just to the ceremonial side, but to soldiering in general. In that I left the army when I was 38. I did exactly 20 years, and I left the army when I was 38, and that was just before the invasion of Afghanistan, sorry, and then latterly the Second Gulf War, and I missed it like hell, seeing that happen and my mates going off and doing stuff. You know, it may seem strange thing to say that because a lot of them didn't come back, and many of them came back terribly damaged physically and with mental health problems. But there was an inevitability that I really, really missed it at that stage. But over the next sort of 4 or 5 years, by the time of the invasion of Iraq in 2003, it had kind of got out of my system. And when I see these things now, when I hear about my former regiments doing whatever they're doing, and when I watch the Queen's Birthday Parade or whatever it may be, I can be much more relaxed about it now. And I think what it is that if I say, well, if I'd still been a soldier now, I wouldn't be doing that. I'd have gone up, probably wouldn't have gone up the system very far, but I'd have gone into different areas. So I wouldn't be doing it anyway. And that was the way I managed to get my head around it. And therefore I can enjoy it more just to watch it. And I can be very critical of the poor ensign of the colour what am I saying, 30, 40 years later. Yeah.
So that's interesting. So would you say that you miss the ceremonial side more or the soldiering side more? Because from what you said there, it seemed to me that you instinctively answered that from a fighting soldier's point of view rather than a ceremonial soldier's point of view. And I wasn't expecting the answer to go that way, really.
Well, I suppose my sort of time as a ceremonial soldier was all over by really when I left. Yeah, I left the mix, as they're called, the Irish Guards, in '84, and I went off to the Queen Mother for 2 years as her equerry, and that really, going off to the Queen Mother, I never really went back. In fact, I didn't go back to ceremonial soldiering. So the next whatever it is, 14 years of my military service, I never did any more ceremonial. So it was very much a sort of a hit at the beginning of my career, and frankly, I'd done it, and I'd had enough of that. a couple of birthday parades and that sort of stuff, and then having been at Quarry, which was a sort of quasi-ceremonial situation for a soldier. It was a ceremonial situation for a young officer. And I kind of thought I'd done that, and I wanted to go off and do other stuff. Yeah.
I've got one more cheeky question,
Mm.
and I'm going to ask it on behalf of my little girl. It's half term this week, and she wanted to play princesses earlier on, which basically involved her being brought lots of food and watching the telly all afternoon by me. And she's this is a very random question, and I will ask it sort of broadly. She's over half term. She's been watching Top Gear. I don't know why, but she's not interested in cars at all. But she just likes silly boys doing silly things, and it makes her laugh, and I like it as well. So she's been watching that. And I said, well, we can't sit and watch Top Gear all day because that's not what princesses would do. And she said, well, actually, Daddy, I think princesses do watch Top Gear. Now, of course, she's coming at this from a Disney princess angle rather than a royal princess angle. But she has made me ask you, and she just wants a simple yes or no. Do princesses watch Top Gear?
Oh my gosh. The awful thing is, I'd like to say yes or no, but I have absolutely no idea.
Well, I will have a very disappointed. I will tell her yes.
Really disappointed. I really am. But I've got no idea.
Thank you for Thank you for answering that question anyway, and thank you.
Sorry.
That's not a problem at all. I've asked the question. I've done my job, and at least I can go back and say I did ask him. Yeah. Thank you very, very much for your time today. It's been absolutely fascinating. I hope we can speak to you again in the future, and I'm sure that we'll have lots of comments from our listenership, and maybe if they put some more questions to us, we can pester you again sometime in the future, maybe when lockdown's over.
Yeah, well, it's been fun, sort of turning over stones I haven't turned over for many years. So, it's been fun. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.